speaking about the DOM, basically it's a model, okay? It's a representation that, it's expecting your data to look like X. So basically when you give the DOM a document that says this is an HTML doc type and it reads from top to bottom, and it can go and create that tree structure with those HTML elements. Now we can use JavaScript and CSS to interact with those elements, to style them, to lay them out, to make them do certain things and look a certain way. That's how all things are built. But it's this idea, this sort of implementation of the document object that is expecting those types. So at least HTML or XML, but that's rarely used and less common today. It's mainly just HTML, and we're on HTML 5th iteration. So HTML 5, meaning we have like block level elements that are type button, type section, and we have type audio. So you can drop an audio file, audio tag that points to like an MP4 an MP3 or something somewhere. So when somebody browses to your website, it can just start playing music. That type of stuff exists. And then there's all sorts of other things that come with HTML5. And then JavaScript to sort of like, once again, click on things interact, select elements, change them, do certain things with them. And really, in web development in general, primarily what you're doing is simply displaying data for the user and displaying it in a user-friendly way so that they can interact with it. Because data is going to exist somewhere. It's going to live on a database, or like we have this idea of the cloud, right? Or like a cloud representation of the database. Okay, so then the browser then can grab all that data, pull it down, and show it to the user, and then the user can take it and do useful things with it. Which is how we have websites and web applications today. So yes, document object model, DOM is the map the browser makes. HTML, CSS, JS is the territory. Map does not equal territory. Right, so that's a great analogy. So just picture like this model or this structure that exists that takes an object and spits it out into that DOM tree that you're able to see when you open up your web browser, okay? All right, so now that we sort of know kind of what this DOM is, at least a high level, we're going to talk about React. Okay, so modern web development calls for simplicity, and which is funny because React is more or less simple. I think it's really simple because it introduces a paradigm that allows you to scale up your applications like crazy. And it allows you to keep things modular. For example, if you had like a certain button on the screen, that button can be reused as a reusable piece of code over and over and over again. And so when we get into this reusability aspect of modern development, we start to think of this idea of composing your application. And the application is composed of components, okay? And what's cool about React is that it is declarative in nature, meaning that you sort of give your component a name and you specify what it's supposed to do, and then you pass that component around as if it's like a callback, right? And you give it some sort of structure and some sort of data, and you present that in a specific way, okay? So one of the tools that I'd like to introduce you guys to as we get started talking about React is this tool called Code Sandbox, okay? Code Sandbox is a place where you can go and like have React built into the code, to the little editor. And you can see, you can go and like create a little application, like a demonstration, and then like sign in with your GitHub, and I'm sure there's integration there. You can tweet it out if you'd like. You could fork it and make, forks of this. So if other people have sandboxes and whatnot, you can give your project a title and stuff, but we're not too worried about most of that stuff. So that's just really high level stuff. So when you first come here, you're going to be given this example of a file structure that is very common in React. So first off in React, we have, the first place we need to look is our index.html file. Now, this index.html file is simply giving us an ID, root. Okay, so this is going to be the root div where our entire app will live, okay? So when React reads this, it says find root div by ID, or div root by ID, I should say, and select that element and then inject our application here. What this allows us to do is then build components based on smaller pieces of React, or smaller pieces of HTML. Okay, but we use this thing called JSX. Okay, it looks a lot like HTML, and it feels a lot like HTML because it's going to be a div. In fact, if it exists in HTML, it can exist in JSX. Since you can see this as a JavaScript file, we know that we're returning. So this is simply just a function called app that is an anonymous function, okay? So we're not passing anything to it. And we're simply just using this just parentheses syntax to know that this is essentially saying return, this, right? But now it's broken. So that's essentially what this is saying by not passing any arguments. So I can put this in a function block, okay? And should save, and we should see our output right here. This is what I love about Code Sandbox, is that we have this nifty little, it feels kind of like a text editor, and you can see your, with no implementation of anything special or important. So you can see how this looks really, really, like really common syntax to you, because you guys have just barely gotten done learning about, like advanced JavaScript, and you just got done learning and implementing a bunch of stuff, for, oops, I gotta fix this. So I'll just go back to where we were at, square one. Okay, and you guys have just barely got learning about the DOM. So now, what happens with React when we return an element, okay? So we're returning this div. Let's just start with the div, and let's leave all that stuff alone for now, okay? So when we're returning this element, which is a single div, and let's just give it text that says hello world. What we're doing is, and then it's styled, so don't worry too much about this inline styles right now, but what we're doing is saying, hey React, take this stuff that is getting returned out of app and go and render it in another place and then give it back to the DOM. So React has this thing called the virtual DOM built under the hood. Now, it's a little bit magical, a little bit mystifying. You don't really need to worry much about it. But you do need to know that every single React component that you build needs to return a single element, okay? So you cannot come here and do something like this. Otherwise, React's going to be like, I don't know what to do with that. Pardon?
Could you repeat that caveat?
Yes, absolutely. So React can take a single element that looks like an HTML element. It's JSX for now, okay? Until it goes underneath the hood. So let me just annotate this because I'm visual and I like to explain things that way too. So basically we have this div here that is a JSX element. JSX is introduced as a way to sort of write HTML-looking elements inside of our JavaScript code. And then it gets passed up to what's called the virtual DOM. Okay. React's engine knows what to do with this JSX, okay? And it takes it and it spits it out to the real DOM in the browser. So that is what's sort of going on under the hood, very high level. And each element or each component, so picture app now as a component, and there's two different types of components we're going to get into today. And so each component can only return a single element, okay? And what I mean by that, let me clear my drawing, is that we cannot have more than one element being returned out of this like this. Otherwise, React's going to bark at us and it's not going to know what to do. You can even see adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. So you need to make sure that if you are going to need more than one element on the page, that you're nesting it. So now I can do a paragraph tag, okay, and say I'm nested. All right. So that's how we're supposed to sort of work it. We're supposed to wrap it in a single element and then return that. Okay. Now, if we were to render out, so you can make a component go and render out multiple components within, but if it's going to render it out, it needs to keep track of it. And we're going to show you what to do that in just a second. I'm going to actually show you how to sort of conceptualize to start building React applications. So just by like this 5-minute walkthrough of kind of how you're going to be composing your elements, you can start to see sort of a pattern and the power of building a function that returns what looks like HTML, but that just gets injected into that spot. So what we're doing here is we're starting with this render method. Okay, this render method comes from what's called React DOM. Okay, so render takes this and passes our app element like this into it as its first parameter. Okay, so this is going to be an argument. I'm sorry. So it takes 2 parameters. This first argument that comes in is our app. So because we built app with capital A, this could be called whatever we want to call it, right? We could say outer or main, right? App. We sort of return it in this style of wrapping it in what looks like, and now we have our JSX. So whatever we call our function here, we simply use this bracket annotated syntax to return that element. And now we're going to get into, okay, well, what if I need to nest things inside of there? We're going to get into that in just a moment. In fact, we can do that now. So I'm going to save this file. I'm going to move over to hello, and we're going to take a look at it. So in every single React component, you need to declare React at the top of your app like so. So import React from React, okay? And then you need to export that component out. So this is very, this is a little bit abstracted because it's using an anonymous function to simply, it's saying export default, and then this function, and all it does is simply return an h1 tag, says hello name. And it's expecting that name will be defined in some way, okay? So I don't want to go down this piece right here. Let me actually just refactor this to say export. So I need to declare my component, so const hello equals an anonymous function. Okay, and you can do this if you're going to just return one thing. You can just say bracket syntax or parenthesis syntax, and we could just say this simply returns something that's going to get passed into this element. And how we do that is by simply let's do the h1 tag like they were doing. Okay. And then we just say, we can do template strings here as well, since you guys are a little bit used to that from the homework that you've been working on. And then this is giving me all these errors because it's not. So h1, and then it's going to say, so we need something in there that comes in, and it's going to say props.name. All right. So we're getting, okay, unexpected token on 4.2. So it doesn't want the return because we're already implicitly returning it, okay? So it didn't like that return keyword. And yes, so render returns out your components to the virtual DOM. So yes, it basically takes your components and goes through it. That was a question. So does render return our components to the virtual DOM? It basically passes your components over there, and it then returns it out on in the DOM structure. Okay. So now let's go back to so let's save that file. And this is not going to do anything yet because props and name aren't defined. Okay, we're going to define those in just a minute. So we go in and we say, from here we're importing. So now you can see sort of this idea of composition. Okay, so import syntax says look for something called hello. So sorry, import as hello. So we're going to name sort of a variable here that we can use later. Okay, and then find it at the root of this project. So go into the root of a project here. That's what the period means. And then / go into hello. So hello is a file named right here. So this is sort of how you path your apps or your components to one another. And so now we can simply come in here inside of our main app. And since we're importing hello, we can just simply do the same style of syntax here and just change it to, we want to actually say hello here, but we're going to get an error. Okay, see how we have these backticks and it's like, I don't know what these are. We need to specify that. And yes, I do have, in fact, I'm gonna get away from the backtick stuff right now just to show you guys this. So now we can say, and you can see like we've passed in this parameter called props, and we're expecting to look. And so since it's a dot, we can just assume that props is going to be some sort of object or something passed to this hello component. Okay, so back in our main index.js, our main app. We need to actually specify what the name is that we want to render out. Now, it's not, so the way to do that is anything that gets nested, anything that gets assigned as sort of a property and an attribute on your components when you're rendering them. So this is rendering out a component called hello. So you put your attributes such as name, and then you say name equals, and we're just going to say, in fact, let's do single strings, Ryan. So now you can see that I gave this hello, and I gave it an attribute called name. I can change this to foo, and I can go back into hello, and this would have to be called foo. Okay, so React uses this idea of what we call props, okay? And you're going to get very, very used to props as we go about this application process, because props are usually some sort of data that is, or props are some sort of data, they're properties for short, or props is properties, or short for properties, that's going to be defined in your parent component. So main app has data, okay? So foo equals Ryan here. And let's just go back to name because foo is annoying. Let's go back to name. And so let's give this back name. And when you pass this down to hello, React knows to take this, render it out as a function that's expecting this parameter called props. And it's basically just taking string interpolation right here. So anytime you have like curly braces, just single curly braces in React, you're expecting to be rendering out some kind of data as usually a string or some sort of value, right? So now, just to drive this sort of point home, if we were to wrap this in a div, because we can't just have, multiple nested elements or sibling elements, they have to just be returning one single element. And let's say there's an H2 or H3 on here, okay? Now we can sort of construct out our person that we're talking about. So we want to go props.age, okay? So now we can see that nothing's being returned over here in the console or over in the little browser that they have in this app. And you can go back and we can say age, equals, and let's actually give it just a number. And that actually needs to be wrapped in curly braces, because it can read strings, so the properties can be set to strings, but if you have a number, you pass it in the curly braces. And you could do so many things here. So now we can say like, okay, anytime like hello is clicked on, let's do something. So we're going to pass this a function. So let's call this on click, okay, or let's call it click handler. So handle click name, or that's terrible, name, or hello click, let's do that, hello click, can get some sort of function, okay? And that function, we can, you can write it here in line, or you can define it up earlier. So I could just say, well, I could just say console.log hello, right? And as your components get, full of more and more properties, more attributes that you're assigning them, more props, okay? So now down in hello, we should have access to this handler. So whenever you name your property up here inside of main app, right? Inside this main app function, and you pass down to hello, we need to call it that same property. So I'm gonna just copy this. And so that right here, I can add this on click and say, when this is clicked, call props dot, handle hello click, just like that. A reference to that is passed to it, and I can save it. And if I, start clicking on this, should have done an alert. There's an error in Sandbox, thanks. So you can see, as I click on Ryan now, I have access to that function. So what's cool about these props is you can pass basically anything you need down as a prop. Usually you're going to be passing some sort of data set. So data equals an array of, well, we got to pass, once again, we got to pass that as our, inside of our curly braces, because we're trying to, evaluate that expression. Okay, so now we're going to say Ryan, let's say Patrick, Pat, Tug, and Lois. And I could get all of you in here, but whatever. So now we have some sort of data that we need to consume down in hello, okay? And then we can go now to back down to hello, and we can expect to be able to use this data, okay? So let's get rid of the handler, because that click handler is pretty useless. Let's actually just comment it out. Yeah, because I want it as a example, and I can share this little project with you guys. That's what's cool about this code sandbox, is I can save it and share it, and I'll do that for you, so you can come back and play around. So now we go back down in hello, and now we have some sort of something to do with this data, and this is like the bread and butter of React. So inside this div, in fact, I'm gonna get rid of this in case I start to click on it. And I'm gonna be able to go back and walk you through this a couple of times. We're gonna have plenty of time to look at all this. So don't be afraid if this is like, what in the world is going on? It's gonna take a few times for you to understand it. And then the documentation at React JS is awesome too. So anyway, okay. So now in here, we can do just a JavaScript expression inside of these little curly braces. So I can easily just say, let's see what's on props.data. Okay, so we expect to see, oh, I need to console log it first. Okay, save that, and let's open up our browser. And when this component loads, it's going to show us, so you can see it rendered 3 times. And that's probably part of a lot of the problem with, or some of the stuff that goes on in the code sandbox. But know that there's like I'm going to talk about the life cycle in React, okay? And render, the method of render gets called a few times, okay? So now we're giving it this props.data, so we have access to props.data. So I can go and do a props.data.map and return now a new array of elements that are going to present to us some sort of, let's give it let's just give each element as a div, okay? And we need to give this a name. So each one of these names in this names array, so props.data, is going to be, let's just call it name, right? Because as we map over it, you need to define that first. Remember the first value you passed to your map callback when you guys built map? Just like, it seems probably like months ago, but it was just a few days ago that you were building map from scratch. So this first value is the element itself, so let's just call it name. and then we're going to get the index as the second argument, okay? So now, so now we can simply just say, I want to see every single name, okay? So now you can see right away that we looped over that list, we returned out a new array, but we just are associating every single index in that array to a name. And this is how you're going to be starting to build your applications. And yes, it is legit magic, but remember, this is just JavaScript. This is just a map function that loops over your data. This is where the magic really happens. When you return out the div, you're passing that div once again out to, this div is JSX right now, and it gets passed out to the virtual DOM. I'm actually going to write out virtual DOM, because if I was to give that an acronym, virtual DOM, which then does all of its magic. So this is all of our fun magic sauce. So under the hood, it goes and it renders out this like JavaScript. It reads it, and it basically transpiles it or compiles it, whatever you want to call it, into a real legitimate DOM tree. So, and I'm going to show you this all in a real application and under the hood how it works. So that is like a very high level crash course into React and sort of what you're going to be doing with it. And I told you I was going to talk about different types of components. So let's move into that. And I'm going to do that by actually getting an application going from the ground up. Okay, so let me leave this up for just a second and go into my code editor. All right, so, and let's bring that in here and full size it. Okay. All right, so we have an awesome README that's going to give you a lot to chew on for this sprint. And don't be afraid if you don't accomplish a ton of stuff. What we mainly want you to be able to do is write out a React component, use class-based syntax, and hopefully get a working to-do application built out of this. So you may be thinking, are you kidding me? We're building a to-do app? That is so lame and trivial. But there's so many crucial parts to building this to-do app in React that give you such an awesome exposure to the principle. So here we go with an explanation of what you're going to be getting when you pull down this repo. Okay. So first off, you're going to be getting a README, and I suggest continuously referencing that and looking at the steps. In fact, that's what you have to do. Okay. But the first thing you ever want to do when you're starting a React application is look into two files at the very beginning. So the first file is this package.json file. So this is going to give you, in fact, we can delete this. Well, I won't do that because I don't want to cause any merge conflicts later. So first thing we can do is look at this package.json, and then you're not really super concerned with these first four properties on this JSON object. You're more concerned with your scripts. So the two scripts you're given are, the ability to call npm start, okay, and npm run lint. You need that run, and those are both in the README, so don't worry about those right now. Okay, but now you're going to be looking at your dependencies, okay, because when you run npm install, it's going to go up to npm.org. It's going to find packages with these names and their versions, if they're specified, and it's going to pull them all into your project as node modules, okay? So it's going to look at this dependencies property, which is just an object that sits here, and it's going to look for path React, React DOM, HTML Webpack plugin, what the crap is that, and Webpack dev server. What the heck are these things? Well, you can assume React and React DOM are what I was just showing you in the web browser, because that's what they are. If you look at this, they're doing the same thing here. They're importing React, and they're importing render from React DOM. And then you get this Webpack dev server that we include for you, that we've set up, that you can basically build. Remember how you ran Python -m simple HTTP server? Well, now you're going to be running a node server, so it's all going to be done in JavaScript. And Webpack can go and bundle your application. Webpack Dev Server can go and bundle up your application and serve it up in one single file. And then when you change a file and then save that file, it'll automatically refresh the browser that you're looking at. So you're welcome, modern development. No more like save, Command S, Command R. That's done. So this is really cool, cutting edge, fun stuff. So it's like NodeMon, yes. So NodeMon is a server that but basically NodeMon is going and hacking and like refreshing the full page. This simply finds what's changed in React and renders that piece to the screen. So you don't get like a full page refresh. It'll actually just like refresh the code live for you. It's, for lack of a better term, badass. All right. So it's pretty sweet. And there's this thing called hot module replacement, and you can get further and further into that as you go. I've never set up a really awesome like hot module replacement. I just like to use Webpack's Dev Server because it does it all for me. Okay, so now we're looking at Babel. We're looking at Babel, so much Babel. We need Babel in order to take our React code, transpile it, and spit it out into a lesser version of JavaScript so that all browsers can read it. So this takes ES6, ES7, and beyond, and spits it out into ES5 so that browsers can read it. And it spits it out into one single file, okay? So now, then we have CSS Loader, which is going to allow us to use like CSS and Sass. Now we're getting a little bit away from CSS native, and we're using a compiler called Sass, which is really awesome. There's also a link to that in the README that explains about Sass. So like for styling, we'll be using Sass. And so everything you need to do for your React environment is in this directory. So, and then we have these loaders that can be used by Webpack to do specific things. So like when you see CSS Loader, Babel Loader, Sass Loader, Style Loader, these are all loaders that Webpack uses and references in your node modules to like get your development dependencies up and running. And then of course, ESLint. We would be nowhere without our linter. So you guys are going to be required to use the linter as you go about this, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so first thing you're going to do when you clone this project, you're going to make sure that you have npm and node installed, which I think at this point everyone should. Okay, so make sure you have node and npm. I would recommend installing Webpack globally in case you get to a point in your career where you need to actually use it as a global command. You don't have to for this project, but I highly recommend it. And then, okay, so now the first step right here, use npm install. So I'm just going to run that. And you're going to watch right here, npm install goes and grabs all of these dependencies that are listed in dependencies and dev dependencies and puts them in this node modules folder. Okay. Now you're going to have to run this because I'm actually ignoring these in Git. So if I'm pushing changes and files to this, I'm ignoring the node modules. And your application is going to do this. Anytime you build an application from scratch, this git ignore file will ignore anything you don't want checked into Git. So you could have a file that's like, super secret API key password.js, for lack of a better name. And you never want to see that in Git. You never want to like check those API keys into Git, okay? Because it becomes open source and people can see everything. So also node modules are going to go and install thousands and thousands of files. So that's just the way the node environment is set up. These are packages built by other people that every single one relies on at least one or another in here. So each thing in this package.json knows to look inside the node modules file, okay? All right, so now we're going to talk about Webpack. So Webpack is a bundler that can go and take these loaders, test files given certain parameters. So anything that's a JS file, we're going to use the Babel loader, and then we're going to exclude any node modules because we don't want to like check all of our node modules every time we run Webpack. That would be insane. It's going to go through thousands and thousands of files. So they should have their own, bundler doing this for you already. All right. So, but what it's going to do, and this is where the cool stuff starts to happen, is it's going to find our entry point for our application, which is found in src/index.js. And it's going to look in there, and that's going to be like the starting point for all of this, okay? So Webpack, go and find our entry at src, so source at index.js. Okay, so look in the very root of this project for source at index.js and output a dist directory. So this is now using path. That comes from right here. Okay, it's just an npm package that helps us with Webpack development and React development in general. So now find a and basically pass this string called dist to resolve, and then everything that comes out of this we're going to bundle onto bundle.js. Okay, and then this is where you specify and tell Webpack what to do. So we have a file called JS and a file called Sass. SCSS stands for Sass, and these are the appropriate loaders that they're going to use for it. And you can pass more than one loader. Okay, and then we just have this plugin called HTML Webpack plugin that does that that web dev server for us. So, okay, so now that we have node modules installed, we need to make sure that we have some stuff going for our application. So let's open the src file, and let's open index.html, and let's write our HTML. This is actual legit HTML because it's in an HTML file. Doc type equals HTML, okay, and then give us a DOM tree. Give us our own little place to like live, okay? All right, so, and then body, and then remember that root tag is the very important part of this tag. So ID here, this is where your entire application is going to need to live. In fact, let's do double quotes because we're in HTML land, and then let's wrap that up, finish it off so we don't get any major errors, and we're going to call this application root, okay? So this, in between this div is where all of your React is going to be injected by the virtual DOM. So React is going to take components and basically shove those components into here based on what needs to be seen and what doesn't, okay? So now as we build this application, it's like, this is our entire root HTML file. This is all we need here, okay? We actually are going to need to point to a script. We're going to need to point to at least one JavaScript script, and that's going to be called, well, there's two ways we can do this. We can just go src, so find the source, and we'll just do it this way for now. Index.js, remember that's the root of our application, right? So it's going to look for something called index.js, and that's where it's going to be, you know, all the JavaScript's going to live in our bundle, or after it gets bundled, okay? Trying to think if that's what we need to do or if I need to do that a different way. Just give me 1 second to think about it. I think I need to actually do it the other way. And I just had this project all set up. So, and I went and deleted a bunch of stuff. So that's my bad. So we actually don't need this script tag because Webpack is aware of this file and it's aware of the the bundle that's going to come out, and that's where the HTML Webpack plugin comes in as well. So you see, this is our template. That's what it is. Okay, HTML Webpack plugin can go and read our file at index.html, and it can essentially take these parameters, and I'll study up on this and get you a better explanation of what this does, but it's going to take this object as an argument, right? Because this is just an object, okay? And it's going to take template, file name, and inject, and it knows what to do with these properties. And so this is how it's actually pointing that HTML doc to what gets bundled out of this, okay? So there's a lot of magic going on with Webpack. Hopefully we get to a point in browser land where they're modern enough to not need it ever again. But this is probably one of the better solutions out there. There's other bundlers like Gulp and Grunt that are maybe a few years behind in the landscape, because when React was first adopted by the masses, which Facebook built React, right? So of course, a dev team like Facebook is going to get, a lot of props, and a lot of community is going to be built around it, and it's going to become the new hot business, right? And so they're making this as like efficient as possible, but they adopted Webpack, and as a result, Webpack blew up with it. And so now, like, everybody uses Webpack for React applications. So even when we get to create React app, which does all of this setup for you, you're going to have the ability to basically go in and see a Webpack file that that Create React app uses for that implementation. And that's just like a Create React app is like a it gives you like a command line interface to basically go and create all this boilerplate for you. That's all this stuff is. It's just boilerplate. Okay. So don't worry if this is like a crash course and you're like, what is going on? Just know that you need to understand at least what an package.json file is, how it relates to NPM, okay? So know that all of these things exist on NPMs, the node package manager, okay? And then when you run npm install, you're gonna go and source npm and find these packages and put it in your modules folder. And then your Webpack config basically allows you to write ES6, and it transpiles that ES6 into ES5 for the browser, okay? So those are things you absolutely need to know about React and this environment. And then it uses Babel to do this. So there's a little Babel.rc file, and it's just saying, hey, we're using React here. Expect this preset with Babel to work. So yeah, Webpack goes and finds like Babel and is able to use it to transpile everything. So that's why we have this Babel loader that basically transpiles all of our JavaScript files and then makes common use of them in the browser so that all browsers can read them. Okay, long-winded there. Sorry about that, but there's tons here. Okay, so your application is going to live in SRC, and we need to move forward with this. Okay, cool. This is where we're at. So now we have our main point of entry, which is our index.js file. So if I simply go and alert hello here, now I can just write JavaScript because it's a JS file, and I run Webpack. Sorry, let's run, because it needs the browser for this. So let's run npm start. That's going to start our Webpack server, make sure we have no errors, and if it does, it's going to tell us here in the console, and then it's going to put everything up on a local host. You can specify this port, but for now, we'll just use 8080 for everyone. And let me minify my code and do this. And we're going to navigate to 8080. And you can see, okay, we've got JavaScript, so we're linked up. So everything's working. All right? And what's cool is now I can go and I can look at the console and look inside our elements tag, and I can see that I have that ID that says application root. And then it injected this. Let's see, I left this out. So you can see Webpack went and injected a script tag under the hood and said it's JavaScript, and we're pointing to our bundle file now. And bundle is going to be all my JavaScript that I've written thus far to, which is here, this one single line, to a bundle file in Webpack land. So if I were if I kill the server by hitting Control-C to kill the server, and I just run Webpack, it's going to go and it's going to run that Webpack config file, and then look what it does in my application. Now I have this bundle and an index.html file. This bundle is all of the code that I've written thus far, plus everything that Webpack does to inject it. Okay, and all it's doing is saying alert hello with a use strict tag so that we can use ES6 syntax. And then pointing this HTML file, it's saying this is our output for this HTML file. Like, that is so cool. That's doing that all under the hood for you. So this is all Webpack, okay? You don't need to run Webpack to build for your development, but if you want to like host this somewhere, you're going to need this dist file, which just means like distribution. And then, just simply pull this HTML file out, pull this bundle file, and they'll point to each other and host it on the server somewhere. And it's going to know what to do because there's so much awesome magic. So that was that's a lot to kind of take in and sort of let sink in, but just know that you're going to get used to this process, and then we're going to be using Create React App to sort of abstract some of this stuff for you. We've already abstracted it by giving you the Webpack file, the config file by itself. And then we also have set up the package JSON so you have the right amount of packages and dependencies. But this is boilerplate. This is a really good place to start for any React application. So now let's do something useful with this instead of just alerting the browser hello. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to move everything over to my bigger screen and move, yeah, so just give me 1 second to set this up so you can see it all happen side by side. Okay. Cool. All right, just move that over. All right. Okay. So now we're going to see real magic start to happen. The same way that you guys went, or you guys followed me over to Code Sandbox, we're going to build stuff in our own like development environment on our own machines. Okay. So let me share my screen again. All right. Can you guys see a split version of my window and my code?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, so now let's get rid of this and turn it into something useful. Okay, and I'm gonna magnify this for teaching purposes and get out of here. Okay, so first thing we need to do is put React on the page. All right, so we have this index.html file. We were just, we use Webpack to build it and submit the file over. So we can simply start our web server now. So let's do npm start, get our web server up and running. And there's not going to be any JavaScript to look at. And just so you guys are aware, I'm still pointing to 8080, and I can refresh the page and nothing's going to be there. But if I were to put, I don't know, let's just say, just so that we know we're still linked up, save that. And you can see the browser didn't even refresh, it just did it, just like automatically. So I can change this, and in real time changes, save my file, and it just goes. It's so awesome. All right, so that is like the power. Okay, so now let's make sure that we do this in such a way that we're actually using React. Okay, so this root is where, application root is where everything's going to exist. I'm just going to change it to root for simplicity's sake. We're going to select that. So first thing we need is to import React from React. Now, if you're using import syntax, and you're simply just passing something between strings, then you know that this, Node knows to find this in the Node modules directory. So if I highlight that, you can see exactly where this exists on my machine at the moment. So it's going to go and look for the Node modules called React. Okay, that's inside of this folder right here after we called npm install. Okay. So that's what's going on with the import syntax there. And we also need this handy method called render from React space DOM or -DOM. Okay. You can also, we'll do it this way because it's a little better. So now what we need to do is we need to build an app. All right. So first thing we need to do is just simply select our elements. So we need to go document. We're going to render, and render is this method that we pulled in from React DOM up here. We're going to render out just a simple div for now, and that's going to say hello from React. Now we pass it the second argument. Where does this need to go? So React, where does this need to go? Where do I need to go to find a route to render this to the DOM? So we're going to give it that virtual DOM route right now, and we're going to say document get element by ID and find the root. Now you can see it automatically appeared up there. And I'm going to change this to an H1 and save it. And you can see now we are going into React and using the React ecosystem for this. So hold the applause. It's absolutely amazing. But by itself, this isn't super duper useful yet. We'll leave this here for now, but I'm just going to copy it, and I'm going to create basically a component that is going to be where all of the rest of our components are going to end up living in our application. So this is going to be our main app component. I'm just going to call it app. Okay. So component is simply a JavaScript function that renders out a single DOM element. Okay. So it's going to render out div. Come on. There we go. And that is going to hold our, and I forgot, I have some syntax errors up here. So thanks to my code editor, it makes me look a little less dumb than I am, okay? And this now needs to turn into, what do I need to call this right here? Based on the description that I gave in that code sandbox, what word needs to go here in order for this element to be rendered? Yep. Okay, so app. You guys are right. It's got to be capital app. So Eli, Brian, Manisha, you guys get 10 points for your Hogwarts schoolhouse of choice. And then we're going to give it an H1 and say hello from the virtual DOM. Save that. Boom. We're building applications. All right. So it really is this simple. Now there are some key elements to understand. Okay. So once again, just to reiterate this, when it's just single quotes and there's no path description, by path description I mean like period, forward slash, foo path, right? When there's nothing there, import is going to look, from is going to look at the node modules. Okay. And then when you're pulling in something from somewhere else, which I'm going to show you, you're going to need to path that specifically. Now, Ryan commented or asked, why do they always leave that space when referencing a component? I'm assuming you're talking about this space. Okay. Usually it's just a syntactical thing that makes us like, I don't have an answer for you. I'm not going to even try and like BS it, because for now I just know that Airbnb does it, and that's the linter that we're using for a lot of this. So now I need to make sure that I actually have my linting going on. Thanks for bringing it up. So now if I, from the root of the application, ls react, if I run npm run lint, it's going to go and it's going to run its linting for me. Look at that. So React is defined but never used. I have you guys ignoring that, because in this case, we're using React, but we just need to define it in this file, but we're not looking at it and using it. Our code doesn't look like it's using it, but we're using it. So, and then we're missing a semicolon there. And then it says on index.js, app is assigned value but never used. App is also used, so that's pretty late.
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah.
So what was the difference there when you did npm run lint rather than just like doing an npm test? What's the difference?
So when I ran the linter, npm or our package.json or node does not know what the command lint is. If I were to run that right now and I say npm lint, it has no clue what that is. So you can look at a list of all the commands that npm knows. It knows access, add user, bin, bug, c, cache, completion, right? It also knows I as install. It knows uninstall. It knows, who else is there? Test is a very popular one. It doesn't know ESLint. It doesn't know lint. So it does know, however, this idea of running our application. So right here, it says run. So when it sees this, it's expecting to go inside of the package.json file. Okay, so Node sees this command, and it's going to look for whatever comes after it. In this case, it's lint. Is that clear as mud?
Yeah, no, thanks for, I see what you're saying there, where it's going through and just seeing what, you're kind of telling it what to go and do, because it doesn't know to do it yet, right?
Right. So yeah, by running npm run, it's expecting to go inside of this scripts object and look for something that it doesn't know, and then it'll know that by the next command. So it's saying reference run essentially this object, and then find the property lint, and then do its command after that. And then when we run start, we define it here, and we can just abstract that by saying npm start. So it knows by default to look in the scripts object and use that start command. Okay, so when we're running start, we're running npm we're basically saying Webpack dev server is our command. And then when we're running npm run lint, it's going, and you can do like lint watch, but I couldn't get it configured to use the watch command so that it goes on every save. And, you know, I could combine things like, you know, point start to lint so that it just always is running, but which is like what the test commands are doing in all of your other sprints. So in this one, we don't have any tests. So this is one that may frustrate a few of you because it's sort of like build this thing and like you're supposed to build it from scratch and go until you have a good working solution, right? But yeah, so in this case, we're not running like npm test or npm run test or whatever. We're just running run command with the lint to get our linting done. So, okay, and yeah, I realized that most of my linting errors were actually from some spaces. So no unused bar and expected 8 instead of 6 on 6.1. Ah, really? Once like that? I need to reconfigure this linter. So I think that's ugly. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I'll reconfigure the linter, and you guys can pull down the changes later after you get them, so it's like good spaces and whatnot. All right. Okay, so I don't have an answer for you about leaving the space, Ryan. I'm sorry about that, but it's a very common way to look at it. Usually if it's self-closing, you're sort of expecting some sort of like properties to exist here. So whatever props come into this component, but we're not concerned with those since this is what's called a presentational component, or sorry, a container component, okay? Now there's multiple words for these. There's container components, there's functional components, I like to call them container because that means they're a component that contains something, and then a presentational component, which is actually going to present something to the DOM. So like in our example, we're going to say, we're going to actually make let's just call it a form here. So let's call it our, so this is similar to what you guys are going to do. So to-do form and bring it in that way. Now we need to say import, and this isn't defined yet. So to-do form from components / to-do form.js, and you can just probably leave that off as long as we specify it. So now if I refresh this, it's going to go and render and it's going to blow up. All right, so let's make sure our node is not working. So you see right here, it's already giving me an error in my terminal. It's saying error in src index.js. We can't resolve components.todo form. We don't know where that is. So we have to actually go build that. So if I have a file now that's called to-do form.js, and I import React from React, and I'm actually going to also pull in not only React, but I'm going to pull in component from component, okay? Because we're going to actually be building like a big, like, right here, this is going to actually be a container component that renders out a bunch of lesser components as well. So it's going to be less of a presentational component and more of a container component in that it uses a class. So now that's all we need there. All we need to do now is simply reference the component class as an extension. So what I mean by that is we're going to perform our class operator here, and we're going to say to-do form extends, this is very familiar from just a couple of days ago, component. And then we need to export to-do form, okay? Export module.export, sorry. I don't know if I need to do that, but let's, yeah. I know I need to export it, but yeah. So that's, oh, yeah. Export default to-do form. I was thinking back to all of my common JS syntax days. So now we have this class, okay? And since it extends component, now everything that exists on this React component, we're going to have access to. And I mean by that, we're going to have access to these methods on the React API called the React Lifecycle methods. Okay, you're not going to need to use these for every single piece in your app, but I'm going to show you how they work real quick. So first thing, if this is a class, what's the first thing we need to do? What's the first function we need to write? Constructor. All right, we're getting it. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is call our constructor function or build our constructor function here and pass it. We're actually not going to pass it anything at this time, okay? Which may be a good indicator that I don't need this to be a class, but we'll see. Oh yeah, I'm going to need it. I'm going to need state. So now we need to call, since we're extending, our best friend super. Yep. So everything that you're going to be doing in React is going to sort of exist on this state object. So a constructor function that's being extended here from component, this class that gets extension from component needs something, needs an object called state. And that's going to be essentially what it is the state of the application, okay? And what that means is like these things exist in memory in this particular JavaScript object, okay? And once again, I'm going to get into like really cool, like some really cool stuff with this. And then your class also has a cool method on it called, because we extended component, we can actually call this render method that simply returns out our JSX. Okay. Hello again from React, but in the to-do form this time. So now, if everything goes well, I'm going to give that an H1 so you can see it. If everything goes well, what we're doing inside of here is we're crafting our application in this giant component tree. So now, see if I can get our awesome annotator to work real quick. Come here, Zoom. Okay, I'm going to do this. Crap, don't do that. Maximize this so we have some more. No, I didn't want to do that either. So sorry. Just make it bigger. Awesome. So now, if we get me some white space here and use this annotate tool, should be able to draw. So essentially from that file structure, you can see that we have this giant app that's going to get rendered into that div in that HTML file with the ID of root. Okay, now app has a child, and this is how you craft all of your React code, called to-do form. Okay, so as you're going and building your application that you're going to be building for this sprint, you can basically diagram it out like this beforehand. You can say, hey, we need app to be just like our main root, so we don't need to worry much about like state here as much as we'll need to worry about it here. So now if this is going to be like our to-do form, we're going to render out some sort of like input, right? And that's not how you spell input. And maybe we're going to have a sibling called like, or like a child, a sibling to input, but a child to to-do form, called like our list elements. So like to-do maybe, right? So as you go and craft this application, you can start to think about your application as this application tree. So you know that on to-do form, you're going to be taking care of state, okay? So the state exists here. So anything that exists on state here, we need to make sure that whatever this to-do needs to render out is going to be handled and taken care of here. And this is simply just going to be like a presentational component. You can do input as like a child component or just simply list it inside of the to-do form. But you may have like some sort of handle change method on here that's going to be sort of bound to this input field. And you can, whatever gets typed into here can get piped through that handle change method and then updated on state, okay? So that's how we're gonna start to think about this. Now, if we're gonna be handling this on state, and maybe we'll have like some sort of button, okay? Okay, and that button is gonna have some sort of click handler, so we'll just call it click CH for short. And when you click that button, it takes maybe what handle change has put onto state and pushes it into state on some sort of like array. And then maybe that's your list of to-dos. And you pass those to-dos down to list element. So now you can start to see like how everything is going to be built and handled on this to-do form. And then you simply have these elements that do these single like one-off type things, right? You have these components that are in charge of like handling, some sort of click handler, some sort of change handler on the input, and then something on state that you can pass down to be rendered out using .map, as a single element each. So as you go about like thinking about this is exactly what I want you guys to do. After you spend a little bit of time this afternoon, evening, getting into like the nitty gritty and reading through the README and learning, about the documentation of things, I want you guys to select your partners tonight, but to the first time you start actually coding, before you touch any code, try and diagram something like this out. Just sort of conceptualizing your application as an application tree. Okay, so now let's move back over to our code and let's start looking at how we can start to make this work. So back to our to-do form, we're going to have this state object. We're going to need, we're going to need some sort of like to-do, sorry. And this is all just JavaScript, guys. This is nothing to be afraid of. So to-do set to a string, and we're going to need our to-dos list be set to some sort of array. Okay? Now we can operate on those and pass them down to like a child component. So we're going to, in our components, if you have this like outer form, make a folder called to-do, right? And then inside of there, you're going to say to-do.js. Okay, so now you can import React from React, and you can just call this a simple function. So we're going to say const to-do equals function that's going to take in some sort of props, right? And that function is going to then, we need a body on this one because we actually need to return something out of it, and then export the default as to-do. This is saying take to-do, and export it as an object. And you're going to see this that's going to be so cool when you see this in the console. So now we have our props, and that's going to have some sort of data. Now we can say props.data, or whatever we call it above, .map, and then map over it, and then return, some sort of element. So if we say this is going to be to-do, then we simply need to, I say simply a lot, return our div called to-do. Hopefully this is just a string and it's not an object, and this would just simply work. Say simply a lot again. So now we have our to-do list, and we want to import in. So import to-do from, where do we go? To-do/to-do, right? And that to-do is going to be then rendered right here, which is going to be our to-do. And we're going to give it our this dots. So this is how you now say data, because we defined it as such down below, as this.state.to-do list. Okay, so now you can use this based programming, which is very, very common in React because it's a constructor. So we can access this .state, which exists on this constructor function, this class's constructor function, this prototype, and we can say this, point it to do form, and find state, wherever state lives, give it our to-do list, okay? This is kind of how you craft out your components. Now, we're not doing anything, so because we don't have any data in here, but if I said Ryan, and made sure that to-do list was working, so now we have to get into some debugger mode. It says, can I read property map of undefined? Awesome, so that's great, because we're in to-do, and we're going to look at to-do here. So you see down here, it's giving me an error and telling me where everything goes. So now we go back into our to-do and figure out what's going on. Props.data.map. So what I can do here is figure out what's on the console itself, or what's on the idea itself that something is not working. But I can also use, and this is everything, everybody needs to go and install this right away. First thing you do when we leave this discussion is go and install the React DevTools. So React DevTools are a way for us to sort of connect to our app, and since our app is crashed, we can sort of reload it. Okay, yeah, so our app is crashed because we have a problem here at this bundle. It doesn't know what our to-do list is. So first off, we need to do some debugging. So let's do this. Let me look in this file. And, oh. No, we get a different error if it's that. So let me just, right here, inside of this return, I can have like an empty div. And I can now start writing just plain JavaScript in here. I can say console.log this.state and see what it's actually looking at. So you can see we have this object. So we have this state object that this render method is pointing to. So for whatever reason, my to-do was not getting this to-do list, which has the idea of Ryan here. So I need to do some hunting. The first thing I need to do is to-do. Since the breakdown isn't here on to-do form, I'm going to look for data. What did I call it? Call it data equals this.state.to-do list, just an array. Okay, now it's saying to-dos cannot read that. So I need to, inside of here, I can, since it's just a function, just a JavaScript function, I can say, what are my props? Okay. Okay, oh, yes, this is one thing that's going on. I'm not actually returning any JSX, and every JavaScript, so now I have to do inside of here, I have to actually interpolate it or use those curly braces, and it's going to be able to say, okay, so now I have data and it's undefined. So now we need to look more at what's coming in above. So if data is undefined, I want to know why. To-do list, did I spell this right? So this is kind of me going through and now debugging. But now that we don't have any errors, I can look at my React objects, and this is all it is. You can see right here with your React DevTools where the breakdown is. Okay, so we have this outer div that exists as a child of app, and then app has some children, right? Because it's got, it's got children nested in it like to-do form. Our to-do form you can see right here on state now. You can see we have this to-dos list. I think I found the problem. To-dos list, and it's an array of Ryan, and then our nested Ryan, or our nested to-do, which doesn't have anything, no props or anything are passed down to it. But you can see we're trying to reference it, and it's because I have a typo. So now we should be able to bust open our React DevTools. We can find, and you can look for this stuff right away. You can say to-do form, and okay, it's going to find that component that we're worried about. And you can look right now, we can see that data comes in and it's Ryan. Okay, how cool is that? So this is like, and what's cool is like you can select this and you can see that it's saying double equals $R. So now if I point in my console and I can say $R, that's referring to what we were just barely looking at. So, you can see now $R points to just a simple JavaScript object, okay? These functions right here just render out an object, right? So to do just becomes an object. And you can see what's going on, you know, underneath the hood by just selecting $R. But if you go back to this JavaScript console or the React console that it's just a Chrome extension. You just go to the Chrome App Store and just download it for free. You can see your entire application tree as you go about looking at it. So you can see what's on state is this to-do form, what's on the state of to-do form, and then what we're passing down to to-do. That's so awesome. I can't tell you how much I've used the JavaScript React dev tools in my everyday job. So now the reason that it's all color-coded is because you can select this little gear when you download it, and you can actually give it a theme, which makes your eyes feel a little bit better. Okay? So very important to understand that the best tool that you can have in JavaScript, in React development, is the React DevTools. So go ahead and make sure every single one of you have that downloaded. So that's a really high-level crash course of the DevTools. But remember that you have a Webpack dev server running as well. And you can all automatically see when you refresh the changes, when you save the changes, that it's going to actually give you an error. So if I just try and do something that React doesn't like, it's going to tell me pretty much where the breakdown is. So if I save this, it's going to give me right here in my console, Webpack is going to throw out this error and it's going to show me something's broken. And then it'll also print that in your Chrome console as well. So you have a lot of tools to debug your applications. Right. Okay, so I've given you a lot here, and this is kind of how you're going to be building your apps today. As you go through and you start doing the research and understanding what React is and why it's powerful, you're going to get into your groups, and then probably later on this evening, as you start to finish the day, and tomorrow I'll have you guys start building out your app tree, and then I want you guys to save some sort of screenshot of that tree that you build with your app components, and then send it to me so that I can sort of talk about it with you. If I need to jump in your channel and say, hey, this is what's going on. And there's going to be as much hand holding as you need to make sure that you sort of get the requirements of this thing. I can 100% walk anyone through the process of debugging a React application, because it's what I've been doing for the last couple of years, and I absolutely love React for a lot of reasons. Let me think if there's anything else I need to touch on that I didn't. Okay, so you'll learn about the React lifecycle methods. Just know that there are so component will mount is one of them. Okay. So just know that there are a bunch, there's a set of initial methods that get rendered through the lifecycle of a component in React. I'll say that again. Every React component has a lifecycle. It has a lifecycle of being built up and then destroyed, okay? So, and there are methods that you can sort of use to hijack that lifecycle, okay? Because there's going to be a time and a place when there's this React virtual DOM running, and some sort of data is not defined yet, and you're trying to render it out, and it's going to drive you insane. And the answer to that insanity is to look at the lifecycle methods in React. Now, a lot of people have sort of scoffed at this use of lifecycle methods as professional React developers, and they move forward into a framework called Redux that we're going to be introducing you guys in a couple of weeks. And Redux sort of takes away some of that management of the component lifecycle and the lifecycle methods and the hooks that are provided for you in the React API. I've given you a really cool resource to go and look at that sort of describes and explains those. I want you guys to be familiar with them. There's component did mount. There's component will receive props. Okay. There's component, and these are just a few off the top of my head. Component did update. Okay, which is kind of they're all named a little funny. Component will update. okay? And these are not in any particular order. Should component update. And they have their own set of like arguments that need to be passed to them. They have their own set of parameters that like sort of go through the lifecycle method with you. And then render is a lifecycle method, okay? Render actually in the building process of your component gets called multiple times. So if I were to sort of just console.log this .state.todo list, we'll probably only see it, oh no, I don't want to do it there, sorry. So we actually are console logging it down here. So, oh, this isn't a traditional extension of the React component, so we don't have those lifecycle methods. Because this is just a plain vanilla JavaScript object, we don't have access to those lifecycle methods. If you ever need them, they will be available to you if you do extends class foo extends component, okay? So if you ever, and if you need them, it's because you've gotten to a point where like state management has sort of become a little bit like unmanageable at that point. But then if you want to go and build your own methods, for example, we want to give to do some sort of method, right? That's maybe an on-click handler. So let's just say handle on click, okay? And you're going to write it just the same way that you were doing in your class, you know, in your homework. So reference that homework because this syntax is what you're going to be doing. And every single click handler is going to take an event, or so every single event handler is going to take an event. That can be an on-change event, on mouse enter, on mouse leave. Any of the events that exist in the window, in the DOM itself, exist in React Virtual DOM, but they exist on this what's called a synthetic event. So you can then we can simply console.log our event and see what we get out of it. So now we need to pass this as a prop to to-do and call it from within to-do. So we're going to say, you know, click, because we name it whatever we want, right? And it gets handle on click. I got you here. This is bound on the class, so we need to give it a this. Okay, another gotcha here. It's not fully bound yet on the class, so you can give it a .bind this. This is now using JavaScript to pass in a reference to make sure that our click handler is actually pointing to our class. So that's one way to do it. Another and even more common way to do it, to bind this actual element, so sorry, to bind this method right here to our to-do form, is inside the constructor, underneath your state object, you can say this dot handle on click equals this dot handle on click dot bind this. And that gives you now access to everything that comes in. So when this gets called, wherever it gets called now is bound to this click handler, so we'll see this console.log event. When you're building React components, you are using this based programming in JavaScript, okay? Just remember that. It's this based, it's prototype, it's constructor, it's class based, okay? And by class, I mean the JavaScript keyword class, and I don't mean the classes that you may be used to from other languages. So now I can click on this div and say on click, notice that it's camel case, and say on click gets props, because that's the object that's being passed down, dot click, okay? And I actually don't need to call it. If I called it, it would call on the render method since we're returning it here, or it'd call on render. So if you look right here, we're console logging our props. Now our props are still, now we are still that data, and that data is returning Ryan as the first index in that array. And then we have this click function. And click is labeled click, so we can simply just reference it as props.click. So now if we actually give this, say, render out props.Ryan, or sorry, props, oh yeah, so we need to map through it. Let's do that real quick. Sorry about that. So inside this, inside these curly braces, we're going to call props.data.map, okay? And we're going to say render out the name, because there could be a list of names here, or to-dos is what we essentially should call it, okay? So now inside of here, we simply return our name that comes in. So every single one of these, but we want to interpolate it, and we're going to say it's going to be a div, right? Otherwise, React won't know what to do with it. So here's a warning. Now, React gave me this warning that says each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key prop. So this is because we're going to be iterating and returning a bunch of, essentially a list of data. So otherwise, React won't know what to do with this. So we say index, and since this is a map function, we get the second parameter of index right here. So we can now refresh it, and it's given us a little tiny Ryan, and every time I click, look, it's gave us that synthetic proxy handler. So now we need to actually do something with this. So I'm gonna, okay, we'll finish it real quick. We could just say, now we can select this on this event handler, we can select target, okay? Now when we call and click Ryan, it's gonna give us that target Ryan, okay? And so since there's something defined in the middle there, since it's the target, it's that whole element that we look at, right? So if we look at our React Dev Tools, we can see this to-do form gets, this handler, it's on click, it's bound, okay? And then there's at least one property being rendered, and that's gonna have, let's see, oh, that's gonna be right here. So it's returning this as its target. So, and you see how now it has the key of 0. We needed that in order for, in fact, I'm gonna change this to an H1. Okay, and I'm gonna break the line here and return this and wrap it now. Since we're getting like a little bit more nested, we needed like to organize this code a little bit better. And cool, that looks a little bit cleaner. So now it's an H1 and I click on it, and in the console I can see the actual target, which is that H1 tag. But now we wanna see that target's value, or what's in the middle of that target. So I can, up here, I can say now target.value, and it's going to give me, oh, it's not, since it's a div, it's kind of in a weird way. So what we would need to do is, let's say we give this a value, or it's an H1. So now we want to name our value. Since we're referencing it, it needs to be a ref, or like a reference to this, and we want to give it that name. So now since we're going to be targeting this target and say event, so on click event, event.target.value. And now we should see, well, maybe not. Maybe I've led you so far astray. Maybe it's because an H1 doesn't have a value, and this needs to be some sort of list element, the list item. Oh, the value is 0. That's weird, it's giving us the index. So I mean, if I said name here, it would be targeting that. So this is going to be good for you to just go and like practice going through this, because I am flailing at it. Live code demos, right? So either way, oh, value is specific to an actual input of some sort. And I'm sorry about that because, okay. You're gonna need some sort of input in order to get a value, or some sort of like input type, right? So it could be type text or whatever. So value is not a good thing to look at here, but we can look back at the target, and we can say, so if we wanted this to like actually do something, we could give it, we could be more explicit when we call the props.onClick, and we can, sort of pass back up the element. So in fact, oh, I was calling it on that div. I got it. I know what's going on here. So we want the onClick on that element right here, and it's going to give us the value of Ryan. That's where it was. I was defining it up here, which I shouldn't have been doing. I'm sorry. I was backwards in my demonstration. So now if we click onClick, we have a way to select that value, and you can see that we gave it that bound, but it's still reporting to 0. Yeah, so let's go back to the target, select it. Should just be value equals Ryan. So either way, you're going to have to do this sort of type of thing, and maybe one of the ways to do it is to handle and pass your function call back with the name that comes in from each element. So on each iteration, just pass, oh, we don't want to do that actually. That's actually gonna fail us. So we'll have to figure out a better way to come up with this. So this would be a really, really good point for me to stop confusing everybody. and yeah, so I've talked a lot about this. There's so much to learn here and so much to do. But you can see from the React documentation that they give you an example. So if I go to React.js, yes, we'll leave that. And if I just simply click on their documentation here, you can see they have a tutorial process that's like going to be very similar to what you're going to be doing. And yeah, so they call their components stateful. So any component that needs state, which is, where's my text over there, which is this component here that we built. So any component that needs state is a stateful component, and it uses sort of the lifecycle methods. So you can see they're doing the same thing that I was doing, right? I don't know why it's doing that scrolling thing when I click on it. So they have a constructor, and then they have a state, and they have these examples on this page. So you're gonna be able to go through all of this. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to touch on. Oh, another gotcha is class name instead of class. So since class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, in React, they didn't want to take away a bunch of the reserved keywords. So if you want to style your element, you need to use class name. Okay, and that equals it can just be a string referencing some sort of DOM or div wrapper or whatever you call it as a class. ID would be different because it's not a reserved keyword. So, okay. So before I turn you loose, what questions do you have right now? And yes, Pat, that's an awesome reference. Yes, it's up on GitHub. So I'm going to release it to you right away. Does anyone want me to address anything? I mean, we're giving you a lot to chew on with this sprint because you're learning React from scratch and you're going to be implementing a to-do list. So there's probably a dime a dozen to-do lists out there as examples in creating your first Hello World React app. We want you guys to try and draw on the stuff you already know. Maybe reference the examples that are out there, but don't go and copy and paste anyone's code for this. And you're going to be able to take it as far as you want. So at first, maybe you're just rendering a list of strings from an array. As you map them out to the DOM. Maybe you then change that into a list of objects with an object of type to do or name to do or whatever, and then like a completed property that you can click on that specific to do and change the state of it, whether it's to do or not. So, and there's so much to chew on with all of this. So if you actually finish a to do app really fast, then you can continue on to the extra credit. I'll just go through a little bit of that. So some tips and tricks. I've kind of given you some of the big gotchas and kind of how to construct this. And then extra credit would be like to use a lot more Sass. So, oh yeah, I didn't even touch on Sass. So basically, Sass is already set up for you to use in this index.sass. And then if you research how to sort of import, so you do like an @import, and then you use some sort of syntax in Sass to select where you want to import from. So you'd say like, I want to import, components slash to-do.sass, right? So you'd select it sort of like this. This is Sass syntax now, so you'll have to go and research that. And then, oh, Patrick found it. Thanks, Patrick. And then you can build, so you can have your main Sass file be right here in this index.css file, and you can build your styles. So like if you want to just select the body tag here, we've got it set up to where this is just going to work out of the box in this file. But we want you to keep your code as modular as possible, right? So as you go about and build your SaaS, don't just do it all in one single file. Create a new file that you need to reference called like todo.scss, and then import it in. So that way you can just say like, you have some sort of class name here that says, right here you have your div wrapper, gets, background blue, right? And then you can so now that it's going to be imported globally eventually through this index.sass file, you can go into your, here, and you can have, whatever you name your, whatever you name your div wrapper. So I named it a div wrapper here. I can go into todo.js, and I can simply drop it in for the class name. Cool. So that's how you'll use SaaS. That's a really high-level view, but you're going to have to go through the documentation and really just see, and maybe just Google how to use SaaS in your React apps. And then as you go through this, maybe share tips and tricks of things that you learned. So if you do research that was really difficult, go and make it all, work. So thanks, Emily. All right. That's awesome. Okay, other questions? Nothing. Okay, go ahead and make sure you jump in partnerships just like we've been doing. Research as much as you can about this and continue to go through those at least first pieces in the README.